I'm here with Grant Gregory, partner at Cantos, co-host for Tech Breakfast Club today. Grant, we did it.
We did it.
This was a great event. People were pumped about it. They showed up. Perfect weather for it. Um, and we've talked since you were made partner, but congratulations, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, what's up with you? What's going on with Cantos?
Yeah, what should we talk about? Well, I'm a long-time attender of the Breakfast Club's, first-time collaborator, so I was glad we were able to do this. Long overdue. Yeah, I mean, my background for people that are just tuning in and maybe don't know me that well, I'm Grant. I'm a partner at Cantos. We're a pre-seed, seed, deep tech firm. That's probably the easiest way to describe us. We like to be a first institutional partner with founders as they get off the ground. So a lot of people that we're actually just meeting with now, we're here today, which is great, and we're able to get them in front of some of our other portfolio founders. My background isn't that interesting. I don't like to tout it too much. But
are you going to talk about the D1 athlete?
No, I mean, we maybe another time. But before Cantos was a founding.
He's a good athlete.
I tried it. I'm moderately athletic is my line. I'm okay at bar sports. I'm pretty good at everything else. But I was previously a founding member of the American Dynamism team at Andreessen. That was a great experience. Had a very tough decision. Had a unique opportunity to kind of join Cantos, who I'd known quite well. So was able to leave on really good terms. But yeah, it's just been really fun. You know, my big reflection actually catching up with a few people I met with in the past few years was, one, how great these events have continued to be and the quality's been insanely high. But then two, it really does feel like El Segundo is just now like the center of this ecosystem. And even when we were starting the dynamism practice in 2022, I mean, LA was kind of mentioned, but like we had no idea where we're going to find all these companies. And I think now we have a pretty clear answer for where that is.
Yeah, and I think is the reason for a big shift in your life. You're running investments out of New York, and then you finally made the jump to Southern California in the past.
So SoCal, yeah.
Which it's good to have you close. But yeah, talk about the evolution, and I'm also curious about not just the pitch that Cantos makes to founders, but the pitch that they made to you to lure you away.
Yeah, I mean, our pitch, I as part of joining Cantos, I had to uproot from New York, which I affectionately called Fun Island, and go from one Manhattan to another. Manhattan Beach is a pretty good place to settle down. So it's been a little over a year now being in SoCal, and it's been awesome. But the pitch that we usually give founders at Cantos is pretty straightforward. It's, we're a really concentrated firm. We're a longtime believer in the category, and we want to be extremely aligned to the founders that we partner with. So we kind of view it as like a benchmark or a white glove type experience where we're going to work really closely with you guys, help solve all these different problems that pop up, improve your odds materially, and then we're really good at baton handing off to the next firms that end up carrying you through the next subsequent rounds. And so I love it because I think the formation stage is just such a unique period of life for any startup. It's the one that has the most fire drills possible. You're constantly in the weeds with the founders. And part of the reason for choosing to move to LA was, as we were talking about, like most of the companies are now here, and it just made a ton of sense to be a 10-15 minute drive from everyone as opposed to a 6-hour plus plane ride. And so that makes it a lot easier, and that fidelity of conversation to us really matters. How did I end up here? Ian is very persuasive, as is the rest of the team. I think like the simple explanation is we had co-invested a bunch together when I was at Andreessen, and so we had gotten to know each other quite well. I ended up introducing him to two founders that I felt really passionately about. One, Shinkei, and Andreessen was
a cool startup.
It's a very cool startup. They're doing fish killing robots. That's my fun tagline for them. But Andreessen had decided to not run at it that aggressively. It was a little too early and weird for them, and understandably so. But I really loved the founder, and so I called up Ian and told him to take it seriously, and then they ended up leading the seed round for Shinkei and then another company that's kind of in stealth right now. But it ended up being this really interesting dynamic because at the time I remember a bunch of people were basically like, why are you wasting time helping these founders that you guys aren't even investing in? And I was just like, I don't know. Like, I really believe in this guy. I really believe in the vision. I think there's something special here. And as importantly, I just have a lot of a joy in spending time with them. And so it to me made sense to spend a disproportionate amount of my limited spare time helping him out. And then in hindsight, that ended up being like, I think the catalyst for Ian to really decide that he wanted to bring me over. And so I ended up getting approached by a bunch of firms, had a few conversations with a select few places about like seriously entertaining leaving. And ultimately it came down to the fact that I think there's two things that are really unique. One is out of everyone I talked to, Ian was by far and away the most excited about me. And as an early stage investor, I think it was just a really good proxy of if that's the type of person that's fired up about you, then I think you're going to be aligned on a lot of things on especially evaluating and believing in people. And then the second was, I still have not found an example of anyone else doing this where you get to leave a firm, you get to keep your portfolio, and you get to inherit your anti-portfolio. And so it's kind of like a silver bullet. I mean, you can draw that up ahead of time, obviously, but in hindsight, like all the dots connect. And so it's been really fun to keep working with all the founders that I really loved at Andreessen that Cantos is also invested in. And then obviously working with other founders within the portfolio that I'm fired up about. So
yeah, talk about the portfolio. Who are you fired up about besides fish killing?
Yeah,
robots?
well, so the little plug for Shinkei is they're just in the LA Times today. They recently announced their Series A with Founders Fund in Interlagos. Safe and Reed, the two co-founders, I actually introduced to each other. Reed was a SpaceXer and then an Anduril guy, absolute stud. And then him and Safe, once they started chatting, it was basically like it was like a marriage. And so they have a fun story that I'll let them do at some point. But
yeah, we'll definitely have them on that.
Yeah, for sure. But Safe was actually in New York when I originally met him. I told him at this point they needed to move out to LA. They actually picked up and moved to El Segundo, so they're right over next door to us. And then once Cantos led the seed round, they brought on a bunch of really impressive talent, really started ramping it up. And basically what they're doing is they're taking this Japanese fishing technique called ikejime, and they're automating it with robotics and AI. And so the quick plug is, if you have fish, most people haven't had great experiences with it. The reason why is most fish, it smells fishy because it's rotting. And the reason why is because when fish die, they're actually doing so in like a really inhumane and horrible manner. So most fish are pulled out of the water in these nets, they're on a boat, and they're suffocating for 45 minutes to 2 hours. And so as you can imagine, that's a horrible way to go. But then also the flesh itself starts corroding, and there's a lot of bacteria, stress hormones, and other issues that come from that.
You can taste the cortisol.
You taste the cortisol. And so if you've had nice sushi, it doesn't smell fishy. And the way that this is kind of avoided is the Japanese have actually invented a technique many decades ago. It's called ikejime. And it basically solves all of this. It's a way to instantly euthanize a fish in a very humane manner. And it basically allows the fish to dry age. And so it lasts much longer. It tastes better. The nutritional quality is much higher. But the way it works is you pull the fish out of the water, you spike it in the head so it's dead, you slit the gills so the blood pumps out, and then you take the spinal cord out so there's no more neural activity. And that effectively dry ages the flesh. And, fishing is an industry that is kind of forgotten about, but fish makes up a huge amount of the protein that the world eats on a daily basis. A lot of it is lost to spoilage. And then one of the things that Safe told me early on that I didn't realize was over 50% of the fish that's caught off of the U.S. shores are actually shipped to Asia. They're frozen, sent to Asia, and then processed there, oftentimes by slave labor, and then sent back to the U.S. And so this is how crazy the supply chain is. And there's a ton of reshoring initiatives. There's a patriotic component to this. There's an element of securing our own food supply. But then, as importantly, there's just a clear angle of bringing technology to an industry that desperately needs it and being able to have all these efficiency gains. So we're really excited to be partners with them. There's a bunch of other companies within El Segundo that we're also really excited about. Another one is Neros. A lot of people are familiar with this one, but it's an FPV drone company for defense. I think this is in many ways like the quintessential Cantos deal. Ian met Soren and Olaf right when they were starting the company. Soren was 19 at the time. He was a high school dropout, world champion for drone racing. And he decided once the Ukraine war started out that he wanted to build a US DFJ. And he realized that there was no one that was doing it the way that he thought they should. And his experience in competing at a very high level gave him this like unique insight about how you could actually create a company that would provide a product that would be differentiated and exciting and viable, but then also how can you make this for at-scale manufacturing? And so Ian was one of the first VCs they met with. Cantos ended up investing in them in a pretty short order, and probably took a bet on them when very few other people would have entertained investing in a 19-year-old high school dropout. And then within a week of them getting the money, they flew out to Ukraine and started working with their military services members to tinker on solutions, it gives you a sense also of like the pace of execution.
Yeah.
And then
was that in the deal memo?
That was not in the deal memo, and frankly, there's a little bit of surprise and some heart palpitations, I think, once Ian found out that they were on the front lines, but they were okay, they were safe. But as importantly, it showed to the customer very early on that these were people that were very serious about figuring out what the problems were and how to solve them. And so we ended up helping them bring on their early hires. We had connected them with a few people that we were quite close with. We have a talent partner, Natalie, who we basically forward deploy to our portcos. And so she was at their office 2-3 days a week at least, helping them hire their early team. And then we ended up introducing them to Sean McGuire at Sequoia. Sequoia, in short order, ends up leading their seed round. And then we also introduced them to some of the folks at VY Capital who were also participating in the seed round, and they recently preempted the Series A end of last year. So it's a really good example of, I think, the Cantos effect, or like the Cantos partnership, where we apply basically our whole team together. We make decisions really quickly, take bets on people that other people might be more hesitant to, oftentimes because we feel really strongly about the individuals. And then once we make that investment, we work tirelessly to be in the office with you, help you make strategic decisions, help get the talent around the table, and when the time is ready, introduce you to the right partners at different firms. And then I think the other benefit is because we're concentrated, if we go to someone at a multi-stage firm, one, we have the benefit of understanding how a lot of these places work from my time there, but then also because we're not sending a lot of deals incrementally to them, they take everything we send them very seriously. So it's a great setup, and then we're also super aligned with them because we're the first institutional check and we'll participate in subsequent rounds, but we want to make sure that we're bringing on other people to the table too that can help the company scale and grow.
Yeah, it's one thing to say that, and it's another thing to see that play out again and again and again, and that you guys are serious about that.
Right.
Is there anything you want to see? Can you envision the future or startups that you want to invest in, or is it purely, I just want this type of person?
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways that we think about it. One is reacting to the people. We try and have prepared minds, but I think we, less than other firms, we're not going to be a firm that has like top-down thesis perspective of what should happen. We have perspectives about areas that we think are pretty ripe for disruption. I think maritime is one that we felt for a long time was pretty interesting, and I'm excited that there's a bunch of companies now going after that space. But some of it is just like recognizing when like lightning strikes you. And if you meet with some of these founders early on, Soren, Asaf, Reed, I think what's really special is like you can see how unique of an individual they are, how much they've thought about a problem, and how fast they work. And that slope is really rare, but when you see it, you recognize it. And I think there's many unique benefits of having started my venture career at Andreessen. I think the one that I can't emphasize enough is like your bar for excellence is the best thing you've ever seen. And being able to get exposure to some of the best founders in the world across not even just the Dynamism team, but across the whole firm. I tried to, make a concerted effort to spend a lot of time with all the GPs and groups there. I think that gave me a really good, healthy level of calibration for what greatness looks like. And then, maybe ironically, maybe not, like I think athletics is probably like the best training ground I had for figuring out what a great founder looks like. Like a lot of the traits that make really great athletes perform at a high level or very similar to what make great founders perform. And so I think it's easier for us to identify when we see that. At the same time, I always think of the Warren Buffett quote of when an industry with a reputation for bad economics goes up against a management team with a reputation of excellence, the industry is going to maintain its reputation. That's the great tension for these categories, is a lot of them have not been touched by technology, and so they're ripe for change, but there's also a real reason why they haven't been changed yet. And we want to find a founder that has a really unique idea, insight, that when they put that forward, it's really a reflection of them. And we view that, we expect the idea to evolve a lot after investment, especially at the pre-seed stage. But we want to see these kernels of insights that we think give them an unfair advantage in the fight against the incumbents. And so it's always bifurcated between those two things. We're never just going to blindly invest in a founder just because. We want to also be believers in the idea, but we also need to believe that the person is going to have the willpower to kind of break through that wall. Like, the final thing I'll say is, on this at least, is we went to the Acquired show in SF last summer, and Zuckerberg was there kind of talking about the early days of Facebook, and he had a great line that was basically like, yeah, if you put a wall in front of Meta at this point, like, there's just going to be a Mark-shaped hole in front of it. And we had been figuring out the language used to describe some of the founder attributes we like. And so Kool-Aid person has really stuck, where it's like, if you put a wall in front of Soren, Safe, anyone else in the portfolio, there's just going to be a Kool-Aid shaped hole in that wall. So that's like, at the end of the day, it comes down to like, do they have the willpower to like change an industry? And easier said than done, and easy to romanticize, but we try and evaluate the person in like a complete surface area picture and go really deep from there on out.
I always think about like the wilderness period for a lot of startups, and it's particularly intense in hard tech. And I'm thinking back to, the last 18 months hanging out with the Neros guys.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there was like a wilderness period.
Yeah.
But I don't remember it.
Yeah.
Like, what did they have to shift their model, or what? What was the wall that they had to go through?
So I think the framework that's useful for these categories is, in a lot of startup land, it's like pivot your way to greatness. And that's kind of like the standard YC lean startup feedback. And I think that's like the absolute wrong thing to do in hardware land. And it's pretty intuitive as to why. But with software, you kind of have like, you can spray and pray, you have infinite ammo, and you can just kind of see what sticks. Hardware land, if you're good, you have 2, maybe 3 bullets in the chamber. And you're trying to fire a sniper that you've never built before, let alone fired, and you have to hit a target 100 yards out. And you have to pick the right target, build the right sniper, aim, fire, shoot, and hit a bullseye. And that's really hard. And it's just a function of, it's different to build in hardware land, but at the same time, I think for a lot of reasons, there's ways to build really lean hardware startups where you can field something quickly, get customer feedback, and in many cases start bringing revenue in the door. And that allows you to iterate over time. And so there's still this like iteration and I think discovery portion that happens, but it really boils down to the framework that Andreessen always likes to talk about, is the idea maze. And can you navigate and talk about the different decisions you've made about which product directions you're taking? And that's kind of the maze that you want to talk through. I like to talk about, we want maze historians. We want people that are so obsessed with the idea of mazes that they know every single maze that's ever existed, who the architects were, why the materials were used for a given one, how you solve each maze. And that doesn't guarantee success, but for us, it just speaks to like this level of like insatiable curiosity and encyclopedic knowledge that you really need to have in most of these categories. If you don't, then it's going to be very difficult on your first 1 or 2 bullets to fire the right direction. And look, there are going to be ventures, a game of outliers. There's going to be times that this model is broken. And then there's also like the other tail end of like deep tech or hard tech is like the fatter startups that raise hundreds of millions to start. That's I think a very different picture. I think with any of the companies within our portfolio, there's always been an early emphasis on what's the fastest way that we can generate revenue? What's the time to revenue? How do we shorten that? And in many cases, there's usually a way where you can offer a smaller, more discrete version of something early on and then step into something bigger. It's oftentimes not the Roadster to Model 3. It's really Falcon 1 to 9 to Heavy to Starship that matters.
You've touched on some of the headwinds or some of the things that make hard tech just like innately difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the advantages for investing in hard tech for a long time was people just wouldn't touch it.
Sure.
So if you had capital, if you had conviction, that was,
A differentiator.
yeah, a
Yeah.
differentiator. Now, maybe it's overstated. People talk about there's like a hard tech bubble. What are your thoughts on that? How do you protect yourself from
Mm.
that? I think Cantos is in a unique situation because you're so early,
Yeah.
that it lends kind of a natural protection to that. But how are you thinking about that? How are you communicating with LPs about the landscape?
I think overall I'm ecstatic. I mean, I had always been passionate about these categories. Before I was at Andreessen, I was trying to break into venture for like 2+ years. I had like 80 something interviews, only got one offer. It worked out. But like one of the challenges was everyone I was talking
That's
to.
insane.
Yes, yeah, it's pretty wild. But I mean, that like I have so many takeaways from those 2 years. One of which is one of many is very clear that all it takes is one yes, and in many cases is like it maps very well to the founder journey of, you're going to get a bunch of no's. It's going to be really hard. A bunch of firms still have never told me they weren't going to hire me, and like I know that that's how they interact with founders. And so I made a promise that I was never going to do that. I was always going to be really communicative and transparent with people. And I just have a reverence, as we all do at Cantos, for like how hard it is to be a founder. And so we want to be a partner on that journey. And I'm thrilled that now a bunch of other firms are now excited as well about these categories, because before the American Dynamism practice existed, I mean, there are very few people taking this seriously. I didn't even have a great name for it. And so I was really glad when Catherine coined American Dynamism and joined Andreessen, and then getting to join that team was really special, and a lot more I'm sure we could talk about. But within 2-3 years now, every single firm has a practice devoted to this, and firms that were trying to poach me from Andreessen a year and a half ago now told me at the time they're never going to look at these categories. Now all of them are looking at it. And so look, does that mean that there's going to be some like prices that are bidding up and there's going to be some like bubble dynamic? Sure. But I think by and large for the ecosystem as a whole, there's going to be a lot more experimentation. There's going to be a lot more iteration. A lot more founders are going to get chances that otherwise wouldn't. And I think that's great. And as importantly, the companies that are doing well have ample follow-on capital now. And that completely changes the game. And I think de-risks a lot of the future questions about most of these businesses. As you were kind of alluding to, like being at the earliest stages kind of insulates us a little bit. I think the other thing that's very important for us at Cantos is we always try and be thinking about what's next. And, if we were looking at like the next defense investment right now, I think that's probably harder, because I think the space is pretty saturated. We're really excited about the founders that we're partnered with in those categories already. And there's a bunch of other factors here. But like at the same time, we're always going to be meeting with the next few American, dynamism investments in defense or any other category. But I think Cantos is at our best when we're thinking about what the next one is. I think Shinkei is like a good early precursor to that, of like what's next for the future of agriculture in the U.S. How do we manufacture and domesticate our own supply chains for this stuff? And so we'll see as we continue to find new opportunities, but we try and be ahead of the curve.
I love it.
Yeah.
Grant, I can't thank you enough.
Pleasure. Thanks for hosting,
Today was
as always. I'm excited for more.